From his website, he's an advocate of heart-led critical thinking, loving leadership, and transformative storytelling. As a writer, actor, dancer, aerialist, speaker, facilitator, and adventure athlete, he lives and leads toward truth, love, and beauty in many modes, with more yet to come as the future unfolds. Yet through them all runs an unwavering commitment to kindness, creativity, critical thinking, joy, abundance, and love. And he's going to talk to us this morning about play, which I think is just exactly what I need to hear. And so, Tom, whenever you're ready, you're welcome to take it away.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. And I'm glad we could still find a way to make this work while keeping everybody safe and warm through the ice. Um, Before I begin, I must apologize in advance to you all. You see, after this storm, when Atlanta has thawed and dried out again, when next you enter the sanctuary of the first existentialist congregation, you will, in all likelihood, step upon at least a few molecules of my sweat. Now, I am sure that the people who have since swept and mopped that storied wooden floor have done their work admirably, but I have dripped and dragged a mighty river of sweat on your floor, and I am certain that some of it still stains those boards. You see, that floor, that space, your sanctuary was an important setting in the story of how I became a professional dancer and of how I learned an important lesson about the value of play. And Patton White was a critical guide in that chapter of my journey. Patton and Pittsburgh Steelers defensive tackle Mean Joe Greene. But before I explain the sweat stains and Mean Joe Greene, let me back up several years. This story begins appropriately enough in Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes, the land of haunting loon calls and pungent lutefisk, the land that has lately become the improbable front line of the resistance against fascism and ICE. Now, Minnesota was my home from 1988 through 95. Carleton College first brought me there to Northfield, Minnesota. Northfield's motto is cows, colleges, and contentment. And as the motto suggests, Northfield is a small, rural, agrarian college town with three claims to fame. It's the home of both Carleton and St. Olaf colleges. It's the headquarters of Maltomeal, which has since been bought up by Post. But back then, it was still the independent behemoth producer of those knockoff brand cereals. You know, the kind that you find on the bottom shelf of the cereal aisle in your grocery store. At Carleton, we could smell the toasted oats in the air most days. And it's the town that turned the tables on the Jesse James gang. You see, one day in 1876, the James Younger gang came to town and they tried to rob the Northfield First National Bank, a bank in which, more than a century later, I would hold a checking account with which to buy pizzas for my late night cram sessions. The James gang rode into town, entered the bank, pulled out their guns, and they told the teller to give them all the money. The teller reached down, raised up a shotgun, and started firing. The gang ran out into the street. But the townspeople had now taken up positions in second-story windows, and they started firing at the gang as well. The Northfielders captured the Younger brothers, while Jesse and the rest of the gang fled out of town. Jesse James was never the same after Northfield. 6 years later, he was shot and killed by Robert Ford. This is a story that's been made into a couple of movies over the years, and it all took place a few blocks from where I went to college. Now, to this day, Northfield celebrates this history with an annual Defeat of Jesse James Day festival. A local high school student is crowned Miss Defeat of Jesse James Days. Really rolls off the tongue. There's a parade. You can buy funnel cakes and caramel popcorn in the town square. and there's a reenactment of the whole story. Several fully grown men of the town dress up in cowboy hats and dusters. They ride into town on horses, they dismount, they run into the bank, and over a loudspeaker, you hear a brief bit of dialogue. "We're the James Gang, give us your money." Then the sound of gunshots. Bang, bang, bang. The reenactors run back out and they ride fast out of town, followed by the cheers and jeers of the crowd. It's silly, it's kind of ridiculous, and it's so much fun. It's an opportunity for children and adults alike to play. And it's considered a real honor to be a reenactor of one of the gang members, even though, of course, the whole point is that the gang was evil and was defeated by the town. But, I mean, come on, you get to put on a cowboy costume, you get to ride a horse. It's also, though, a collective reminder through this annual play that this is who we are as Northfielders, as Minnesotans, as Americans, as human beings of conscience. When bullies and other ne'er-do-wells come into our communities and start causing trouble, we don't hide. We don't comply. We don't stand passively to the side. We rise up together and run them out of town. Minnesota is, of course, living that narrative admirably right now and reminding all of us to do the same. Well, this festival, the Defeat of Jesse James Day Festival, is in September, just as students arrive at the two colleges. So the Defeat of Jesse James Day Festival, this day of playful history, collective resistance, and a parade, was my introduction to the home of cows, colleges, and contentment. In Northfield, I also became one of the founding members of the Carleton College Cycling Club. This was around the time that Greg LeMond, some of you may remember, he was establishing himself as the first great American champion cyclist in the Tour de France. And he lived then not far from Northfield in Edina, Minnesota. So it wasn't entirely crazy to think about racing bikes in Minnesota. The winters are, however, as you probably know, very long and very bitter. We would go out riding our bikes in colder weather than you might believe, layered up with plastic bags insulating our knees and our feet. But frostbite, hypothermia, and icy roads, they did impose some limits. There were long stretches of winter when we simply couldn't go riding outside. So I found myself looking for a way to keep my legs strong through the long winters. And I recalled this episode of The Brady Bunch. Now, in this episode, Peter Brady was on the high school track team, but he was terrible at the hurdles. And then Pittsburgh Steelers defensive tackle Mean Joe Greene showed up, and he told Peter to take a ballet class. Now, Peter was reluctant. He knew he would be teased by the other boys, but Mean Joe Greene persuaded him to give it a try, and sure enough, ballet transformed him into an adept hurdler. Now, you can consult your memory and check IMDb all you want, but you won't ever find a reference to this episode. It turns out that my mischievous mind had mashed together 5 childhood memories and made something new of them. Number 1, the classic 1979 commercial for Coca-Cola, in which a young fan gives Mean Joe Greene his bottle of Coke, and Greene then gives the kid his sweaty jersey. 2, stories of New York Giants defensive tackle Rosie Greer and his fondness for needlepoint. 3, an appearance by Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver Lynn Swann, a teammate of Greene's, on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, where he talked about studying ballet to improve his strength and balance. 4, an episode of The Brady Bunch that features a cameo from LA Rams defensive end Deacon Jones, who encourages Peter to keep singing in the Glee Club despite the teasing that he's taking from his football teammates. And 5, an episode of My Three Sons in which Robbie, struggling on the track team, is encouraged by his girlfriend to take ballet lessons. The lessons dramatically improve his performance on the hurdles, and Robbie ends up cast in a ballet recital. So that episode of the Brady Bunch in which Peter takes ballet, it doesn't actually exist. My creative subconscious made it up from a variety of loose story parts that were laying around in the attic of my mind. Carl Jung once wrote, "The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity. The creative mind plays with the objects it loves." That's what I had done. I needed a creative solution to keep my cycling legs strong through the long winter. So my mind played around with those pieces and parts of stories I loved, and it made them into something new, a new solution, a new story. And now that I've told you about this episode, I imagine, don't you wish that it actually existed? Okay, but the point is, Mean Joe Greene was telling me to take ballet so I could become a better cyclist. So I did. I mean, who's going to argue with Mean Joe Greene, right? And ballet did indeed help me keep my legs strong. Now, I was a pretty good cyclist, especially in a sprint. My ballet bolstered legs could briefly power me past most of my peers. I was not a good ballet dancer at all. Struggled to remember combinations, couldn't keep my feet in the right positions, generally flailed around in graceless genuflections of proper form. But I kept taking ballet class anyway. And slowly I got a little better, if never all that good. Also, I started enjoying ballet for itself, not just as cross training. And then I took a class in modern dance, and I liked that even more, so I kept doing it. Not because I was all that good at modern dance either, better at it than ballet, but still not very good. And not because I imagined modern dance would lead to anything for me. I had no ambitions or career plans to dance. I kept dancing simply because I enjoyed playing with movement, with my body. I was just following my bliss. Well, after college, I continued taking dance classes for a year or so, and then I let it go for a while. I went to grad school. I ended up afterward in Atlanta writing for Creative Loafing. And one day, my editor, Suzanne Van Atten, she asked me if I knew anything about dance. I told Suzanne my story about taking ballet for bicyclists. Then I started covering dance for the paper, along with opera, performance art, literature, and on some rare occasions, politics. I was inspired by writer and journalist George Plimpton, who you may remember, he famously spent time in boxing rings and on football fields to write about those sports from the inside. So I decided I would sometimes write about dance from the inside. To write about tango, I took almost every tango class in Atlanta, went to many social milongas, and even danced with one of my teachers at Tierra, this old Latin American restaurant that had hired her to provide a little entertainment for the diners. To write about the resurgence of breakdancing in Atlanta, I hung out with two local crews, the ATL Funk Lords and Burn Unit, and I learned how to do a very slow and very awkward six step and some very rudimentary popping and locking. Now, much as with ballet, I wasn't good at breakdancing, not good at all. But I picked up what I could, and I definitely learned an even deeper appreciation for what the real B-boys and the real B-girls could do. One night at the masquerade, I showed up to watch these two crews battle. I'd seen movie depictions of breakdancing, so I came expecting something very intensely aggressive and competitive, albeit within the peacekeeping boundaries of the art. And yes, there was some of that, until the masquerade started projecting old Richard Simmons workout videos on the wall. Soon, both crews were incorporating Simmons' infectious aerobic silliness into their freestyling, everyone smiling big and busting out laughing. They were playing. They were playing with movement, mashing up breakdancing with aerobics to make something new. Then in 2005, I wrote a story about contact improvisation, this improvisational dance form created by Steve Paxton in the early 1970s. Paxton and several other collaborating dance makers wanted to explore outside the boundaries of established dance vocabulary. How do our bodies want to move? How do our bodies move instinctually in response to other bodies? How can we deepen our awareness of our own bodies and of the other bodies in the room? What happens when we are fully present, listen kinesthetically, and move in the moment without any pattern or play? The contact in contact improv is about dancing with other people, often in deep physical connection, sharing weight, lifting, being lifted, moving together. Though sometimes the connection is purely energetic in the absence of physical touch. How is your partner moving? What possibilities does their movement give you? How will you choose to move with them in the moment, again, without a plan? In the early days, Paxton would set up a wrestling mat. He was also a martial artist and a gymnast. And he'd have dancers run and throw themselves at one another, provoking instinctual responses. Now, as you might expect, this did sometimes result in injuries. So over time, some guidelines emerged, not rigidly codified movement, just basic boundaries to keep the dancers safe. But within those guardrails, there was a call to free creation. Let's just play with movement and see what happens. In the decades since Paxton's wrestling mat sessions, contact improv has become an international practice among professional dancers and well beyond. It's used as a method for developing new movement that's then set to choreography. It's also sometimes performed improvisationally, each production a new exploration, a new artistic adventure. And many people now participate in contact improv for no professional or performative reason at all. They come together in contact improv jams simply to move with one another, fully present and free. They come together to play. Now, play is often relegated to the world of childish recreation. It's set aside by fully vested adults in favor of productivity, practice, passive pastimes. This divide's not simply about what we do, but about how and why we do it. A game of soccer, a dance, a journey through a city, with a simple shift of intention and attitude, one person's play can become another's hard work. Alternatively, even a day of odious errands can become a game. Developmental psychologist Peter Gray, in his book Free to Learn, writes, "The characteristics of play all have to do with motivation and mental attitude, not with the behavior itself. Two people might be throwing a ball or typing words on a computer, and one might be playing while the other is not." So how do you tell the difference? Well, Gray's colleague, Dr. Stuart Brown, founder of the National Institute for Play, writes, "Play is the state of mind that one has when absorbed in an activity that provides enjoyment and a suspension of time. And play is self-motivated, so you want to do it again and again. Play is presence, inherent delight, following your bliss, not grinding toward your goals. And yet it's precisely this temporary suspension of external motivations and concerns that can deliver some of play's most meaningful gifts. Research that's been summarized by the National Institute for Play finds that play enhances our trust, our flexibility, optimism, problem solving, emotional regulation, perseverance, empathy, openness, and sense of belonging. Even great scientific breakthroughs begin with play. Albert Einstein wrote that the desire to arrive finally at logically connected concepts is the emotional basis of a vague play with basic ideas. This combinatory or associative play seems to be the essential feature in productive thought. Play also feeds our creativity. Behavioral ecologist Caitlin O'Connell writes in her scientific American essay, Play is Serious Business for Elephants, which you should absolutely read. She writes, play provides an environment for experimenting with risk. Being silly is another important aspect of play, one that gets us outside our comfort zone and forces us to test new strategies. Silliness in our movements, behavior, and even language helps us think much more broadly and creatively. Contact improv jams sometimes get quite silly. I learned this from the inside. To research my story on contact improv, I started taking classes with Pat and White, most of them on the wooden floor of the sanctuary at First E. We would fold up all the chairs and lean them against the walls, and Patton would lead us in a warm-up and some skills-building exercises. And then for an hour or two, we would simply jam, rolling on the floor together, climbing and crawling, lifting one another up and carrying each other around. Do you know those undignified impulses you suppress in your serious daily life? Do you know what I mean? To make a funny noise, a silly face, to bounce or twirl around or collapse to the floor and pound the ground? They all came out in the jam. Clownish characters, pratfalls, animal noises as we slapped our own butts to invite another dancer to climb upon us. Uninhibited laughter and general delight in the unexpected, the unplanned, the movements that surprised the movers even as they made them. It all felt not effortless, but joyful in the effort. An exuberant exertion. And yes, in all this happy, heavy lifting, I sweated up a storm. I wasn't alone in this, though I suspect I was on the higher end of the sweaty spectrum. Again, I'm sorry. I would towel myself off midway through a jam, maybe change into another shirt, then dive back in and keep jamming. By evening's end, I'd be spent, exhausted, and buzzing with delight. I fell in love with contact improv, and I kept going to the jams long after the story I wrote about it was published in Creative Loafing. The jams were joyful spaces for connection and creation. I came to them not with an agenda or a goal, but for the pure delight of movement. And in the midst of those times of spiritual silliness, I discovered that my body could do much more than I had previously known. I found that I was strong and agile, that I had presence and poise, that there lived within me an animal grace that took over when I got my busy brain out of the way. It was a far cry from the rigid traditions of ballet or even the more organic forms of conventional modern dance, which I had struggled so long to embody. All these prior experiences, they had told a story about my body that I had come to believe. I liked dance, but I would never be very good at it. In the playground of contact improv jams, I started to tell a new story. My body knew how to move in its own particular way. Play had set me free. Well, much to my own surprise, my continued presence in the contact improv scene led to invitations to perform in the works of several choreographers. Those performances led to other invitations and eventually invitations not only to perform, but to choreograph. In the 2 decades since, I've performed professionally in dozens of dances, as a member of several dance companies, and as a guest artist in several more. I've trained with Pilobolus, an internationally renowned dance company that was formed by non-dancers around the same time as Paxton was creating contact improv. I've taken up aerial dance, and I've collaborated on an award-winning dance film. While I now call myself a professional dancer, along with other titles, dance has never been lucrative for me. I'm paid to dance, but it's certainly not how I pay my bills or invest in my retirement. But it has greatly enriched my life with deep friendships and artistic satisfaction, while pushing me always to grow in mind, in body, in spirit. I follow dance wherever it leads me, without goals or plans or any particular strategy for success. I follow my bliss. I play. All thanks to Peter Brady and Mean Joe Greene, or something like that. Ralph Waldo Emerson once wrote, "It is a happy talent to know how to play." And so I invite you, all of you, to put aside purpose and propriety, to do something that absorbs you in self-motivated bliss, whatever that may be. Remember that it's not about what you do, but how and why you do it. Experiment. Find that thing that brings you fully alive in the moment. Allow yourself to enjoy it without any external justification, without any future goals. Just play. You may be surprised by what little silliness opens up in your life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. It's an invitation that I needed to hear. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.